Hello. So we are going to look at how we make a corner seam, and we're going to show how to clip it and how to press it. So the first thing, of course, we need to do is we are going to have to sew a corner. So I have cut my fabric already 5 inches this direction by 8 inches this direction. And I've drawn on here about a 3/4 inch seam allowance. 5/8 would do as well. And you can see that we have the lines drawn on here. And I have 2 layers of fabric. So 1, 2, because we'll need to bag these out. So the first thing I'm going to need to do is stitch these together. One thing I always suggest is that you get in the habit of pinning along your stitch line, since your stitch line is marked, and getting used to pulling your pins out as you sew. This will give you a much more accurate stitch guide and make sure that you're actually stitching on the seam line where it's supposed to be, as opposed to using the edge on your sewing machine to dictate the width, as we do in commercial sewing. So I have this pinned. Remember, the machine is going to be coming in this way, so you want to have it pointed in the direction that your needle will proceed so that you can pull the pins as you go along. So that's the first step, is having this prepped. Then once we have stitched it, remember when you stitch it that you're going to back stitch at the beginning, turn your corner, and back stitch at the end. Now when we are sewing, you would sew it this direction and your needle is going to be coming along here. And when you get to the corner, make sure that your needle is in the fabric. Lift up your presser foot, rotate the fabric, and then proceed along your way. And backstitch at the end. Once you have it to this point, then we are going to trim and clip this. So this is still at that 3/4 inch seam allowance. And I'm going to trim this down to about 1/4 inch. And I'm going to keep the corner at this point. So we're just going to continue. You could mark this, but there's no reason to. Eyeballing this is perfectly acceptable. So I don't need this extra seam allowance now. So then my next step is that I need to clip my corners, because when I go to fold this in, there's a lot of extra fabric right at this point. And if I were to fold that all in, you can see that it actually then folds on top of itself. So we're going to try to reduce some of that extra fabric so that it's not creating extra bulk. So I'm going to clip the corner. Now I don't want to go right up next to it. I want to stay about 1/8 inch away, or 1/16, somewhere in there. And you can see it's just a small distance. Then I'm going to clip sort of at a 30-degree angle and a 30-degree angle. And so you can see how we've reduced the bulk of the seam allowance. And now we're ready to turn this around. Now we could turn this around, but you can see that it's kind of bouncy. So we actually need to press this. And to help with the pressing of this particular seam, get rid of my seam allowance that I trimmed off. I'm going to sort of flip it so that it's almost like a bag. And then I am going to take my iron and I'm going to press my seam allowances, holding this a little tight, all to one direction. And I'm only going to be able to get in the corner as a certain distance, because your iron isn't going to be able to go all the way into the corner. So you want to press it as much as you can, and you're just pressing it to one side. And then I'm going to do the same here. I'm going to press this seam allowance over. So holding that, and I want to press that over. Now again, I haven't gone into the corner, but it's created a much more flattened seam here, which will help me be able to fold this over. The other thing I'm going to do is I need to pull my corner out. And there's a couple of different ways that we can do this. Probably the easiest way to do this is with a point turner. My favorite is the bamboo point turners. You can get these quite easily online, but there are plastic ones that work just as fine. The goal here is you're going to take the point of this and you're going to put it into the corner and try to very gently pull out the corners so that we have a sharp corner, just like we see there. Then, using my iron again, we are going to press that. Now, some of the watch points I will say is you want to be careful that when you are clipping your corners, don't clip so close that you clip your threads. If you do clip your threads, you're going to have to come back in here and restitch this ever so slightly smaller. And you want to make sure that you are getting a really nice crisp line. You don't want you want the seam to be laying right down the center of those two fabrics so that we don't see it rolling over on either side. So that is how we do a corner seam pressed and clipped.